Have you ever wondered why your first outdoor ride, your first open water swim, or your first run in the spring outside just feels terrible? You've been training all winter, you've been consistent, and then you step outside on that first nice day, and everything feels so much harder than you remember it feeling last year in the fall when you hung up your wetsuit, when you hung up your bike, and you've been training all winter. You've been in the pool, you've been on the trainer, you've been on the treadmill, and yet you get outside and it just feels lousy. Why is that? Well, you didn't learn fitness or you didn't lose fitness, but your body lost something. And today we're going to talk about what that is and how to get it back, hopefully very quickly. So welcome to the Be Fierce and Try podcast. I'm your host, Jill Bartholomew, and this is where endurance training meets real life. Now let's get into it. All right. So what's going on here? You put in all that training over the winter. I've been there. Sure. I know you've been there too. You've put in the hours on the treadmill. You've been going 2, 3, maybe more times a week to the pool, whether it's master sessions or out there on your own at 5 o'clock in the morning in lane 4. You've been there. And so what's going on? Well, first, there's the obvious stuff, right? You've been sitting on a relatively stationary object in a very controlled environment for the last 3 to 6 months, right? Depending on when you hung up here in Pennsylvania. It starts getting cold towards the end of September. This year, I think I was training outside until World Championships in Marbella and then promptly hung everything up the second week in November. So that's November, December, January, February. I think I did my first real outdoor runs, aside from trips to Florida, which is much warmer most of the time, in the middle of March. So that's 4 whole months where it really didn't do much outside. So, when you go outside now, you've got the temperature. And if where you are is like here, it's sometimes cold, it's sometimes warm, it's sometimes humid, it's sometimes not. I went out for a run the other day, forecast said it was going to be in the high 60s, and it ended up being like 38 when I finished. So how do you dress for that? Well, you dress for either being warm when you start or being warm when you finish. And sometimes you can't accomplish both without trekking around a bunch of layers with you. And there's the humidity, wind, rain, temperature changes, and then just the pounding is different. When you're on a treadmill, treadmills are really fascinating to me as an engineer, right? Spent 25 years as an engineer, and it's really fascinating to me because the entirety of run form is different on a treadmill. On a treadmill, you are basically moving your body in a way that's optimized to not fall off, right? The belt is moving, and while it's on it, whether or not you're thinking about this, your goal is to keep pace with the belt. You're not pushing, you're not pulling, you're kind of just moving. And it does not say it's easy because it's not, but the body mechanic is different, right? And, a lot of people like me tend to get more injured on the treadmill for that reason. It is very different. And then you go outside and you're pushing and you're bouncing in different ways. And of course, the terrain is different. So there's that. And then the neuromuscular side is just getting used to it. Like, think about the bike. If you're on, say, Zwift or Rouvy or Full Gas or, Trainer Road or whatever your poison is, right? If you've spent the last several months, maybe 100, maybe 200 miles a week on that device, so your bike is perfectly stationary. Now, maybe you've got a fancy trainer that moves side to side a little bit, moves forward to back. Maybe you put the tennis balls under the feet, or you got like the kicker move that moves kind of in all directions a tiny bit. Okay, so that gives you a little bit more comfort, but you're not stopping. You've got no hills. I mean, you've got grades that you're going up or fake grades that you're going up, but you're not really going down. And, the devices today can do a decent approximation. You put a a fan in front of you that's connected to the trainer through like Bluetooth or Ant or whatever. And it's changing the amount of wind pointed at you as your speed changes. It's all great, but you're not going downhill and there's no turns. I think that's the biggest part, right? There's no turns. Clicking out, you know, you're not going to fall unclipping off the bike. You don't have to put your foot down coming to a stop. There's no cars that you have to pay attention to. It's a completely different environment. And then you get out there and the fear is back. You know, there's cars that you're not used to and they're closer than you're comfortable with because it's been 4 months since you've ridden with them. And it's been 4 months since they've ridden with you. And there's no turns. Did I mention there's no turns? There's no hills. And I don't know about you, but that first ride out, that first turn going down the hill, you're going maybe 30 miles an hour, 40, you're having fun. And then the turn comes and you're like, crap. And then your body kind of remembers like, hey, I need to lean into this because if I don't, I'm going to be on the ground or over that guardrail. But, you know, that takes some getting used to. And, you know, a lot of people will slow down. I find it really interesting for me. There's a few segments in my area that I ride a lot. I like comparing my speed on those my first ride of the year versus my last, like often they're a lot faster in the fall than they were in the spring, even if the power is the same. And it's all just like riding technique and, you know, having those 6 months to adjust to being outside and, you know, going downhill and handling. So then we have pacing. When you're, you know, training, you know, pacing is kind of computer controlled and yeah, maybe you're using erg, maybe you're not using erg. You know, we have these different devices. But, you know, when you're out running and it's just rolling and you don't even know it, it's like a fake flat you're on. And you're looking down and you're like, wow, my heart rate is so much different than it should be. I had that experience actually the other day. You know, I've started to run outside. I haven't ridden outside yet this year. That happens tomorrow. But the heart rate when I came back inside was way lower than it was outside. And I was like, why is that? Like, that's right. Because my treadmill is on like, it's just fixed. I just have it set. It's like 1.5%. You know, it's not 0, it's not 10. It's just like fixed percent, you know, set it and forget it. Go run out your hour. And then, you know, you go outside and it's like up and down and sideways and turns and, you know, that guy is in front of you that you're like, no, I'm better than you. And of course, maybe you pick up the pace a little bit to make sure that he knows that he sees that Iron Man tattoo on your calf or something. And then you get inside and there's none of that. And I'm like, wow, my heart rate inside is so much lower. Like, what's going on? I had this on the trainer last night, had like a zone 2 heart rate ride. And I'm like, took me like 15 minutes to get my heart rate in the zone. Why? Because I've gotten so used to, you know, running outside and fitness has started to really kind of ramp back up. And I'm sitting there like, okay, I'm riding in like zone 3 just to get my heart rate up. You know, I think, you know, this transitional time of the year, those kinds of experiences are not uncommon. And like this time of year, your fitness is probably starting to really kind of ramp up. Okay. So what are some big mistakes we all make? And I mean all of us, right? Coaches, athletes, newbies, elites, we all make the same thing. We go outside and we're like, ooh, this is fun. And we're enjoying things and we're just going. And all of a sudden we find that we're like in zone 6 accidentally. We're going way faster than we probably should be. And if we're, you know, out doing a workout, is like, hey, you're supposed to be in zone 2. And yeah, I'm not. I'm out doing a hero workout. I didn't set, you know, an intention to do that, but it just kind of happened. You know, why is that? It's like, well, because like we're having fun. And that's where we have this huge difference between working out outside and working out inside, right? I mean, obviously there's like traffic lights and hills and, you know, potholes and whatnot. But inside, we have a dial on a treadmill that dictates how fast the treadmill is going to go. And if our plan says we should be running 10 minutes right now, you set it to 10 minutes. Or if you're like me, maybe 1 or 2 clicks faster than that. You're still in the range, not enough that, you're going to get yelled at, but enough that like you feel like you're doing a little bit extra. And then you go outside and none of those controls exist, right? It's like, well, I should be riding at like zone 3 power right now. And you look down and you're like, zone 5. Why is that? Well, because I'm on a hill. And, I had one athlete the other day and, he's on TriDot and his plan called for him to do a couple intervals and his overall NTS was, say, 100 for the workout. And he ended up coming in at like, call it 140. And he's like, but I did the workout. I'm like, yeah, but look, you did the workout, but you were on a hill. Like, he's like, well, how do I control that? I'm like, well, that's why you have gears. You can change the gears to reduce the effort it takes to go up that incline. Or if it's sufficiently steep, you run out of gears. And then you really don't have a choice. And even if you do use gears, if you're just grinding away, it doesn't really matter if you're in easy gear or hard gear, you're still at 60 cadence. You're still going to be doing similar effort. So you got to use the gearing to allow you to pull up the cadence. And it's making those adjustments. Now let's talk about open water. I was chatting with a friend this morning. She's preparing for her first Olympic, and I'm so excited for her. And we're talking about her swim times. And she's been pretty consistent. She had an injury in the fall and, started, running in the water, which turned into swimming. And you see, this is how triathletes are born, right? They start out as cute runners and then injury happens. And then they're like, oh, I'm going to swim. And then like, I have a Peloton. I'm going to use that some more than I did. And all of a sudden, they can run again. And now we have a triathlete. So the baby triathlete, she calls herself. And so anyways, we're talking about her swim. And her swim times are actually pretty impressive, I'll be honest, especially for someone who has really not a lot of previous experience in open water. It's like, oh, well, are you doing flip turns, doing open turns? How long does it take you to do 1,000? I did think this is runner's brain. She's like, I'm like, how much does it take to do 1K? And she's like, what's that in yards? I'm like, 1,000. Because I'm talking about 1,000 yards. And in her head, it's like, 1 kilometer. And I'm like, no, it's 1,000 yards. And, we came up with a time and we're talking about open water. I'm like, all right, well, going to take that and make it a little bit longer, assuming in open water you don't have turns. You're going to fatigue probably a little bit faster than you do in the pool because, there's other people around you that are kicking you in the face and there's currents to contend with and you don't get that little micro, uh, you don't get that little micro rest that you would get at the turn. We don't think of it, in the pool, if you're doing an open turn or even a flip turn, there is that little teeny tiny rest at each one. And when you're in there, you don't feel like it because you're holding your breath and you're still moving, but you're not actively using big muscles in your body, right? For, aside from feeling like you might suffocate and drown, you don't have all the muscles moving the same way you do when you're just out there swimming. And in an Olympic, most Olympics are 1,000 yards or 1,000 meters swimming. So you go out there and you swim, but there's no stops. I mean, you could stop and hang onto a buoy or a kayak, but like that's not really part of the course, right? The course doesn't say, hey, go to the first buoy, hang out for 30 seconds, then go to the next buoy, hang out for another 30 seconds. It says you start here, you finish there, and you keep the buoys on the right side so you follow the right course. So you think about it, when you're out in the open water, you've got that to contend with. It's a much more endurance activity than the same distances in the pool. And it's more chaotic, even if you're the only one out there swimming by yourself, which I would not recommend. You should always have a buddy at least. But even if you're out there with no one around you, you've still got to contend with one, you're in an open water body. And if you're used to swimming in the pool, right? You have that like built-in discomfort of I can't see the bottom. I don't know what straight looks like, and I'm moving up and down in a way I'm not used to because, open water has currents and waves and wind. And then put that into a race situation where you've got other people around you who are splashing and kicking and, you're hitting them, they're hitting you. Maybe you got, knocked in the face or on the shoulder by someone's hand. And like newsflash, 99.999% of the time when that happens, it's not intentional, right? I've had the random like grab on my ankle. I've been knocked in the face. I've come out with black eyes before. I've nearly lost watches multiple occasions. So make sure your watches are secure in a race. But the point is like there's this whole neurological connection that you build through the season that you lose, right? Because it is lose it, use it or lose it, and you get it back pretty quickly. But, if you think about it, when you're in a pool, it's a much more controlled environment. And so in like all three disciplines, you're really getting out there in a less controlled and more chaotic environment. And you really have to give yourself some grace to allow yourself to readjust to that. I think the bike is the biggest readjustment. Like on the run, you might feel like your heart rate's a bit higher than you're used to inside. And, you might, if you're asthmatic, obviously you have that to deal with as well, which is probably, a little bit different than indoors. But on the bike, you have so much more to pay attention to than just like how much power or cadence or heart rate you're putting out at a given time. So, moral of the story is give yourself the grace to like not feel bad that as you transition from outdoor or indoor to outdoor, that things feel different and that you feel out of shape. You're not out of shape, or at least not any more than you were yesterday. And if you've been working out consistently, through the winter indoor, it'll come back. Now you've got a new set of skills that your body has to say, I remember what this feels like and get used to it again. And it's fine. It's just like in the fall, that first treadmill run feels like crap, doesn't it? You're like, man, I don't want to be on the treadmill. This is horrible. It doesn't go anywhere. There's no wind. There's no variation except for what you put into it when you touch the dial. And you don't touch the dial as often as you probably should because you're doing other things like moving your arms. So, it's just adjustment. Like, what are the things that you can do to, help with that? Well, one is like throughout the winter, if you're just training in a static environment, try to change it. On the treadmill, there's not a ton that you can do, but don't always have it as a flat road. Some of the more advanced treadmills, I really like this feature where you can put a program in. Some you can attach to like Zwift and it'll follow the variations of the course in Zwift, which is kind of cool. But if you can't, you always have the incline dial. Use it. If you're doing hill repeats, don't put it on a hill. And if you're doing something with intervals, don't do them at 0. Pull it up. And by the end of the winter, if you're doing that, that first run outside might feel less bad. And on the bike, I don't know that there is a ton you can do through the winter to readjust or shorten the readjustment, but, get out there and do it. And, riding for the fun of it, is not a problem. I mean, we talk about junk miles all the time, but I guess I might be like the odd coach where I'm like, junk miles are generally not the right thing to do, but we all got into these sports because we enjoy doing them. And if we don't get the opportunity to enjoy it, then what's the point? So go out and ride your bike, turn off, Garmin or Wahoo or whatever bike computer you're using once in a while. Just go out and ride for an hour, whatever. Ride with friends, find a pack to ride with your kids, and just go out and have fun. And I think, going out and just doing it and having that repetition without the stress of also managing a workout, I think is great. So what I tell my athletes is throughout the competition season, so basically from like whenever the weather gets warm enough to ride outside, through the end of the season. Do your structured workouts indoors. That way you can still get the high quality structure. If it's intended to be pushing your cadence or pushing your power, whatever the point of that workout is, like do it indoors. Yeah, for most people, those workouts tend to be under 90 minutes anyways. So doing it indoors isn't that difficult. And one advantage of indoor training is does tend to be easier to fit into a schedule because you can just go downstairs into your basement, your garage, or wherever and hop on the trainer and get it done. No planning. You don't have to worry about what time the sun rises and sets and what the weather's like. And then do your long stuff, you know, outside. If you have a long ride, go out and do it. And don't stick just to trails, right? Race. The problem with trails is they're flat and they're flat and they're flat. So the only skills you really develop on a trail is avoiding other people who are on the trail. You're not really doing a lot of turns. And yes, they do have turns. Some of the trails around here have some pretty fun S turns on them. And that's not to say like don't ever ride on the trails, but don't ride on trails exclusively. Find places that you feel comfortable riding that are not trails. Where I live, we live kind of at the edge of civilization between the busy suburbs of Philadelphia and the farmland of Lancaster. If I head 5 minutes in one direction, it gets pretty congested pretty fast. And if I head 5 minutes in the other direction, there's horse and buggies. So, we have options. And I tend to head west or north where it's a bit less congested, fewer cars on the roads. There may not be shoulders on the roads, but it's okay because there's just in general less traffic. And other times, like on the Saturday mornings at 6 a.m., right around sunrise, there's nobody out. So find your comfort zone, find paths that you're comfortable with and go and ride them. But make sure you have the right safety gear. One of the fascinating things I find every year is there's the mad dash to hunt for all of the stuff that you used every day through the rest of the year and then didn't put away where you normally do in November, or you did put it away and it found a way of migrating through the winter to somewhere else. I went to go out for a bike ride the other day. Actually, it was when I was down in Charlotte. I brought my bike down. I went down to get my next level bike fitting certification. And I was like, oh, I'm going to bring my bike with me. Brought my trainer with me, brought all my run clothes. And I was fully planning to go and ride my bike outside. And I had routes planned and everything. And I couldn't find my radar. And I'm one of those people who, I am not all that afraid to ride on the roads. But I will not ride without my radar because part of the way I develop comfort out there on the road is specifically by having knowledge of what's around me and knowing that there is a car approaching me fast or slow or whatever, and how close they are to me gives me a sense of not control, because let's face it, we have very limited control as cyclists, but at least knowledge of what's out there and comfort in that knowledge that I have some ability to control, where I am and the likelihood of something bad happening. And I couldn't find it. I found my son's, I found my husband's, but I couldn't find mine. Theirs were all right where they belong, but mine weren't. And I was going through, I'm like, well, when was the last time I used it? Last time I used it was in Spain. So then we started going through the luggage we brought to Spain. Well, of course, that was all empty because it's 6 months ago, 4 months ago. And lo and behold, it was exactly where it shouldn't be. It was in the bottom of a bag with gels and other stuff that we had emptied out of the suitcase and never made it to being put away. So I'm sure everybody has a story just like that of going from the fall to the winter and into the spring. Okay, so all that reframed. The first couple workouts outside in the spring, they're kind of rough. And that's okay. Worry more about the fact that you showed up, you did it, and look at it as when we travel, we do shakeout runs and rides and swims for the same reason. It's getting used to the environment. And this first week or two back outdoors, I think is kind of the same way. It's our bodies having to readjust to being outside, having a lot more stimulus than we're used to and having to exercise muscles, in this case, neurological muscles that we have enabled or allowed to rest for several months. So that's my take on it. Yours might be different. I would love to hear your opinions and thoughts and experiences getting back into outdoor training. And, do you agree, disagree? And what sport do you find to be more difficult getting back into? Swimming, biking, running. All right. With that, I do have one little thing I wanted to put out there. I have now very excitedly entered into a partnership with Delmo Sports for the Women's Philadelphia Triathlon. I am the official coaching partner for the Women's Philadelphia Triathlon. And I find that to be an amazing pairing. I'm super excited about this. You may have seen the postings on socials, but if you have not signed up for that race and are a female in the Philadelphia region, definitely sign up for that and take a look at BeFierceMultisport.com/Philly Tribe. We've put out there a few pretty discounted training packages in collaboration with TriDot to help get you across the finish line. So take a look at that. And I am super happy to answer any training questions that you have. Until then, next episode should come out next week. And I hope you enjoyed this. If this helped you, if you liked this, please subscribe. Reach out to me at BeFierceMultisport.com. And until then, until next time, be fierce, be you, and I'll see ya.